July 7th, Raymore City Council work session. We have three items on the agenda tonight, beginning with the water sewer rates. And this would probably be your item then.
I thank you, sir. Good evening. In 2011, the council adopted a policy whereby each year we would review the water and sewer rates and establish the next year's rates based purely on the cost of service that the enterprise fund was realizing. Its standard business model. As a matter of fact, Kansas City Water Services uses it when they're applying the rates that we're going to be paying to them, and they have to basically justify up all of their costs. The only thing you're trying to the advantage to the public for this is the only thing that the city is trying to recoup is pure cost of service and what goes into delivering that particular, the water and sewer. For the past 3 years, in addition to looking at cost of service to lessen the effects of any increases and increase any decreases that might be realized, the council asked us to use up available fund balance, get it down to a comfortable level of that $100,000 to $200,000 level at the end of any given year after the 20% reserve was used up. One of the things that contributes to this year's recommendation is we did that a little bit too well last year. And so we're seeing a pinch in that available fund balance, and we're very cognizant of possible future liabilities that the city may realize that we need to be thinking about in making the recommendation for next year. The assumptions that we use to get to this year's recommendation are general expenses in the water and sewer departments increasing by 4%. That might be a little bit high, but we prefer to be conservative. Population increase of 0.71% and consumption increase of 1%. Those two numbers pushed up against each other show us that we're seeing a slight increase each year in the amount of water usage from existing households, but not much. It's remaining relatively stable. Known factors that we're having to deal with are Kansas City Water Services increase in water cost of 5% this year. That's a known factor now. It was an unknown factor last year. They had been indicating a 0% increase for this year. Little Blue Valley Sewer District increase of 6%. Middle Big Creek increase of 0%, and a transfer to the Enterprise Capital Maintenance Fund that we use to repair existing infrastructure of $234,144. That is a reduction from previous years and goes back to that funding a future liability issue as well, and keeping the rates, using that transfer decrease to keep the rates increase as low as possible. The Kansas City Water Services increase of 5% will mean an 18.1% increase over the past 3 years, and the Little Blue Valley Sewer increase of 6% will mean a 22.8% increase over the past 3 years. Significant, all having to be borne as a cost of services. Those are the two largest costs that this fund realizes in any given year. All of that leads up to a recommended increase overall of 51 cents per 1,000 gallons of usage. That represents, for the average household usage, which is 5,000 gallons, $2.70 in their average monthly bill. The way it would be spread would be water would go from $5.99 to $6.15, a 16-cent increase. Sewer would increase by 35 cents, and that would be up from $5.80 to $6.15 for volume users, and for winter average users from $6.25 to $6.60. And once we receive direction from the council, of course, we would bring this. One of the other things that the council had approved was each year bringing this to a public hearing at a future regular meeting of the council. Then we would take that amount that was established by vote of the council and plug it into our fee schedule that we bring to the council. And it's my intention this year to try to bring all of that within a condensed time frame, so you're looking at any changes up or down in the entire fee schedule, voting on the fee schedule all at once, having everything in front of you so you can see what we're doing. That would be used then to establish firmly next year's revenue for the budget.
Questions of staff? Councilmember Kellogg?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With the growth rate that you're talking about for the citizens and the increased usage in that, recently we have renegotiated the water capacity that we're able to get from Kansas City. With that increase, are we worried about depleting or getting into that extra reserve, that extra amount that we negotiated, to where it might cost us more in the near future? Are we okay on that as far as what we are able to purchase from Kansas City for the long term?
The increase to from Kansas City was approximately $750,000 that's already been budgeted for and encumbered, so it's been accounted for within the budget. What we bought was additional capacity in the line in case we need it. Mike, how long was that capacity going to take us out to, approximately? And that's probably a conservative number, because, as I like to say, if Mike had his way, we'd have a water tank in every driveway and 2 additional tanks in every garage. He's that paranoid.
Other questions of staff?
You know, I think I asked the question last year, does it ever make sense for us to, you know, get away from Kansas City and go with our own water source? And I'm accepted of the answer that you gave. The question is, does it ever make sense for us to look at processing and treating our own sewer? You know, getting away from, you know, Middle Big Creek and some of these other places, and actually doing that in-house, because that seems like that's, you know, keeps going up and up and up as well.
And if I could respectfully dovetail onto that, it's also impactful from the standpoint of annexation, because you may remember annexation presentations have been made to you all where logical annexation takes place by way of being able to treat your sewage. But I'm going to let Mike answer as far as, and he's probably rolling his eyes behind me here, I'm going to let him answer that question.
You know, back in 2004, we've looked at that. We look at it from time to time. The biggest challenge we have right now is the DNR is not issuing any new water treatment permits in our watershed. That's why Big Creek had to partner with Pleasant Hill. So our option would be to either partner with Peculiar, who has a plant, or Belton, and both of those have some pretty significant capital improvement costs to be able to get the sewage to the point of treatment. So at the present time, at the current rates, it's still most economical for us to continue pumping and having Little Blue be our primary treatment source.
Mr. Fairborn, one of the things I was kind of looking at this was, you know, we had the 60-cent decrease last year, and I was looking at the spreadsheet put out in our packet, the kind of the mild roller coastering of the increase and decrease. I know this may seem like a rhetorical question, but I'm assuming that is not something easily controllable. It's kind of like herding cats. I mean, there's always going to be an outside variable, because the known factors that we dealt with this year, Middle Big Creek had a cost of service increase of 0%, but that could change. All of these can change from year to year. Is there any additional things we can do to help normalize that? I notice we're looking at a possible $1.73 next year, but then a $1.37 decrease the year after. I mean, is there any additional factors that could affect that, or?
It's a good question. Because of the order of magnitude of the 2 costs, sewage treatment, cost of water, that are associated with cost of service for this particular fund, we are somewhat at a slave to them changing those numbers in any given year, and a 1% increase or decrease in what they're telling us ahead of time can make a very, very large swing in, and again, the three for this year, the two big hitters were the 5% unexpected increase from Kansas City Water, and then last year we had the unknown of a future liability that has to be considered if we're going to be prudent financially.
As kind of a follow-up to that, and I appreciate that, does it sound illogical? Because last year it was great when you could look at citizens and say, hey, you know, the city's working to get you a 60-cent decrease, but now we have to go back with a 51-cent increase. But next year, boy, that's a hard pill at $1.73. Would it be better to, I guess, this year increase it more than 51 cents to try to, you know, and to try to bring down? I mean, how well is it to normalize those numbers? Or are we somewhat reactive to all these other variables?
We are definitely reactive to previous variables in that they contribute to the bottom line available fund balance that we then have to account for. When we were doing the estimates, interestingly enough, if you go back to last year's memo, the 51-cent increase was what we were actually predicting, but we were predicting it over 2014 and 2015. Events occurred that accelerated that. We actually believe that we will be able to level out an over dollar spike and going down $1. And so you will not see those numbers necessarily next year at all. Because again, we were thinking that we would be in the range of 51 cents through 2016 overall between the 2 years, but you're seeing a completely different set of numbers here based on these new factors. Do I think that with time and getting more than 3 years of background into the, similar to the pavement management system, it starts to level itself out so that we can make those adjustments? So yes, I do think that the next 2 years, you will not see that dramatic of a swing, and I think that we'll be able to temper any increase down by using that 2-year period. Honestly, probably not such a good idea to try to predict with such a dynamic fund what's going to happen in the next 2 years, but it would be unjust of us not to show that to the council at any given time, because it factors into your decision making.
And I'll add in there, when I sit on a couple of sewer district boards, Little Blue Valley and Middle Big Creek, and the costs associated with running a sewer plant or water treatment plant is truly incredible, especially when you have some older equipment that is going offline and newer equipment coming online and that sort of thing. But in response to unknown cost, had a ballot issue not been removed by the courts earlier this year, Sugar Creek was going to annex in a quantity of land into their city. And on that quantity of land is some equipment that belongs to Little Blue Valley Sewer District. And had that occurred, Little Blue Valley would have had a spike in costs, because all of a sudden they're going to have to be paying a lot more taxes. And that cost would have been passed on, I am sure. They're not capable of absorbing it. And the question I have, it sounds like with time, everything's going to settle down a bit. At that point, could the council consider going instead of every year to every 3 years or something like that? Or would that not be a good idea?
At most, from a material standpoint, I'd recommend 2 years.
Okay.
Number one, so we don't get ourselves into trouble. Number two, if it's a true cost of service model and you're telling the public, we're only going to charge you what we believe to be true costs or potential liability costs that we see on the horizon, we need to stick with that. Or at least that'd be staff's recommendation as a policy of the council.
And your question about water treatment, I'm going to flip that over on its side, and water sources is a concern I think we all have, because we have a single point of failure right now. If something happens to the Kansas City water, we're going to be limited to what we got in our towers. I believe, was it Peculiar, no, Belton was looking at Water One, or was it Peculiar?
Belton was looking at Water One.
Okay. And in the future, there might be something that we could leverage there to bring in a second source of water. It'd be really handy if our rate of growth in a city would dramatically increase when we need that second source of water. Then we'd have funds to be able to bring it in. So,
And we actually, when we negotiated this recent amount, made sure that the amended contract did not penalize us for exploring other water sources. Before that, you were really locked in with Kansas City in you used them and you paid if you asked anybody else to come in and take a look at providing water.
other questions for staff? I think we'll go ahead and move forward with this then.
Thank you. We'll bring it to you at a future council meeting.
The next item on the agenda is a texting ordinance. Rather than talk, we'll just text to each other for this item. And, it looks like you're all set. For the viewers at home, we'll go ahead and use the mics. Chief?
Oddly enough, just for kind of an interesting little, you may have seen this promotion. It's an anti-texting promotion. We kind of thought we'd start this one off to give you a multimedia presentation. Just kind of thought that was kind of interesting, just for a starter for this topic.
Well, Mike and I thought that we could actually kill two birds with one stone if you wanted to talk about texting while road striping. So, and then we could get you out of here quicker. But actually, Councilman Stevens had asked us to take a look at the possibility of creating a city ordinance with regard to texting while driving. We had looked at this. This has obviously been something that is, very close to our hearts because it's such a dangerous proposition to do any type of distracted driving. Studies have shown, all of us have seen, different programs that have addressed this issue, either just talking on the telephone, texting, emailing, even studies that have shown listening to radio programs, whether they're political or just music in nature. If you're distracted while you're driving, your attention span or your attention is taken away from what's happening on the road, and obviously we want to make sure that individuals who are driving are paying utmost attention to what's happening around them. This was a great example of just that split second of looking away from the screen to look at the text message that they were receiving was just enough time to be distracted enough to be involved in an accident. In taking a look at that, when Councilman Stevens asked us to look at that and to look at the state law, because there is currently a state law in Missouri that deals with texting while driving, I had a conversation with Bill Marshall, who's our prosecutor here in Raymore, to talk about that. One of the things, and you probably have all of the information in front of you from my memo to a copy of the state law, to that information from Mr. Marshall as well, is that the state law is fairly restrictive. There's a section in the state law that I address in my memorandum, in the staff memorandum, that says that any municipal ordinance may not supersede the state law. And the state law, of course, deals with only individuals who would be texting and driving that are 21 years of age and under. My opinion, and strictly my opinion, is that, of course, that misses out on a huge segment of the population, obviously, that are texting and driving. But it does address those individuals who are operating commercial vehicles, which we had talked about. You know, obviously, you don't want you know, over-the-road drivers or individuals who are operating commercial vehicles to be, you know, texting and driving. So at least the law does provide for that. One of the things, just from a law enforcement standpoint, it's always much easier for us to enforce a city ordinance. So if the council were to make the decision to enact a city ordinance, it is much easier for us to write a citation to an individual and to have that citation or that violation heard in municipal court than it is in state court. So what Mr. Marshall has done is has drafted a proposed ordinance that would mirror the city or the state law exactly, with the exception of section 11, which talks about it can't supersede, the local ordinance can't supersede the state law. So, you know, we do see individuals who are texting and driving, emailing and driving, you know, creating all sorts of hazardous situations with distracted driving. But again, going forward, if the council were to determine that that's what they, the direction that they wanted to go, it would only apply to individuals 21 years of age and under. So, and I know Councilman Kellogg had asked, you know, maybe for some history on cell phone usage and that sort of thing, which I would be happy to do. But are there any questions about, I mean, it's pretty cut and dry. You know, we really are forced to mirror the state law.
Councilmember Kellogg?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chief Zimmerman, for the report. Excuse me. If we were to enact a city ordinance, the logistics of it, what would that mean? Would that mean that the violations would come before the city court and our municipal judge instead of the state court down in Harrisonville? Am I
Yes,
correct?
yes, and that's why it makes it much easier for us to enforce, because we would be writing those city ordinance violation municipal citations, much like parking tickets or other hazardous moving tickets. It is more difficult for us, especially to get a violation in state court. The state court is reserved for those more serious, you know, misdemeanor and felony cases. So having this be an ordinance violation, it is much easier for us to enforce in city court.
A couple more questions, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Maybe I'm wrong, but correct me if I am, please. I was understanding that a portion of the fines goes to some kind of training for the police officers and such. Am I correct on that?
Yes, sir, you are.
Would those funds still go to the same places if we do enact a city ordinance, or will those funds stay with our police department?
Actually, there are actually two funds, and you're absolutely correct in what your understanding of the law is. There are two funds. There's the Missouri Peace Officer Standards and Training Fund, which is the post fund, that we get a portion of that money back that is cycled through the state. But also there is a training fund at the municipal court level where a portion of every traffic ticket that is written that goes into a restricted revenue account that provides for training for police officers. So yes, it does stay here locally.
Okay, and I had another question, but I've forgotten it, so I'll let it come back.
We'll,
Thank you.
we'll allow the other council members to ask questions. And Councilmember Moorhead? No, Westcoat.
How is this ordinance enforced? You know, I mean, is it just the officer sees somebody, you know, holding a device? You know, because even, you know, because I know this exempts anybody using a hands-free device, but they still have to dial, you know, if they're just going to make a phone call, they still have to dial the number through their phone in order to get it to sync with the earpiece. So when that happens, and I mean, what's the logistics of how this is actually, is enforced out on the streets? I mean, because, if an officer just sees somebody with the phone, I mean, does that give them probable cause to pull someone over? Or, I mean, what all is entailed in that?
Well, it's certainly, much like any other type of violation, where the officer observes someone, just like the reasonable suspicion and then ultimately probable cause that would lead the officer to believe that the person is committing a violation, whether with that distracted driving the person is lane weaving, if there are other factors that are involved, or if there's an accident involved, and then we ultimately learn that, that person was texting while driving. It could be a combination of any of those things that you mentioned, either observation by the officer, and then, come to find out, once they take that reasonable suspicion and they talk to the driver, they find out more information about, what would lead them to believe that that violation has occurred, whether or not they write the citation or they give a warning, or that sort of, but it would be all those facts and circumstances that would lead them to believe that that violation had occurred.
Okay. Councilmember Holman, did you want up next? Okay, well, he's, and then,
Chief, is with most of our new ordinances, the city has a conduit of different ways to get information out to our citizens about changes in our laws. Obviously, our city magazine, the closed circuit TV channel. With this ordinance impacting a fairly narrow portion of our citizens, those being basically between the ages of 16 once they've obtained their license and age 21. Now that group between 18 and 21 is a little tougher to get, but obviously you've got kind of a captive audience between the 16 and 18-year-old group in the schools. Would it be fair to assume that you would attempt to begin some type of educational effort once if this ordinance were enacted, to let the local schools know that this is now in effect, we're going to be issuing citations for this effective such and such a day?
I am always a huge advocate of public education. Anytime you're going to change the rules of the game, I think that the public should know that, this is what you're anticipating, and that the enforcement of that will change because now it's a city ordinance. So absolutely, I agree, public education is important.
Thank you.
This kind of goes along with what Councilman Westcoat asked. The problem with application is, and I know the Supreme Court recently ruled that cell phones are actually have been removed from the warrantless search list, and now they in some instances would require a warrant. So application, could the officers turn to another ordinance violation like a careless and imprudent operation of a vehicle or other things to assess because the driver is in essence not paying attention? The reason why I bring this up, at 6:15, I went to McDonald's, and as I was turning left with the green light, which I know is a striping discussion as well, a woman ran the red light looking at something other than obviously the cars that she was about to hit. We all honked. She was still more concerned with whatever object was in her right hand and continued on down towards CVS. So, unfortunately, I didn't see a cell phone. I clearly saw her looking at something else. She ran the stoplight and weaved into another lane. Officers still have the opportunity to punish based on that conduct, even if they can't directly prove cell phone use, correct?
And that's absolutely
So-
correct. Even without a city ordinance about texting and driving or distracted driving, there are all sorts of other moving violations that could be applicable in any of those circumstances, whether it's lane straddling or running a red light or, driving too slowly in a lane of traffic. I mean, there are all sorts of things that you can sort of tell if you've been behind somebody that's either texting and driving, they're all over the road, or they're driving really slow, or those sorts of things. All violations that we could still cite without this ordinance.
The one question I had about Mr. Marshall's packet here, and unfortunately he's not here, he had given us information on section 560 of the revised statutes of Missouri regarding the fines, but I noticed in his proposal there was no identification of fine amount. I'm assuming, is it his recommendation that we stay within kind of our standard ordinance fine amount? Because I mean, we have everything from up to $1,000, which would exceed our current ordinance amount, to even section 2 of the state statute, $20,000. I mean, did Mr. Marshall give any indication of that he wanted to deviate from our standard fine amount?
Actually, no. What he said, he defined infraction as it's defined in the state statute, and said for an infraction, the fine would be $200.
Okay.
So yes, that was his recommendation.
Okay.
Councilmember Kellogg?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kind of a question for council, and probably you too, Mr. Mayor. If we went ahead and decided to enact our own ordinance here in Raymore, I'd be supportive of it. But even a step further, you know, would there be enough support amongst the council members to come up with a resolution for our state representatives to send that, asking them to actually enact on something that has some teeth in it besides the age limit that's out there? You know, I just fail to see where it's okay for me, because I'm over 21, to text, and a 20-year-old that works with me at work not. You know, I don't, you know, I would support a resolution to the state legislator. You know, that's what I'm asking. That we support to get rid of those, first of all, the silly age limit.
Yeah, the council can certainly decide to send a letter to our 3 state representatives and our state senator in support of that. They will be, or some of them will be, at the Peculiar Chamber meeting tomorrow. And if you'd like, I can just check to see, you know, just bounce it off them and see what response I get.
Please do.
Okay, will do.
Councilman Kellogg, I will tell you that in doing just a little bit of research about phones and phone usage and all, there were 6 separate bills in the state of Missouri that were introduced to toughen the laws on distracted driving, and none of them got any traction with the legislature. So more power to you if you can talk them into it.
Thank you.
Other questions for the chief? Oh, go ahead.
Have you had any previous instances recently where officers have commented that they have seen drivers? I mean, how frequent are officers seeing drivers using cell phones or texting?
I don't know. I couldn't speak really to, you know, what necessarily the officers are seeing. I know I do. I'm sure that you all do, you know, as well. I know amongst the command staff, you know, we talk, pretty frequently about seeing that. And you can always tell, you know, when somebody, as you said, you know, she's looking at something, you know, she's not paying attention, you know, and all that. But the officers agree that, you know, in speaking with them about this, it's obviously going to be much easier for us to enforce a city ordinance than it would be the state law, because, you know, getting, you know, an infraction or an ordinance violation into the state court is much more difficult. So it would just be one more tool. Not that they can't and don't write all of those other violations that you mentioned. It would just be another tool.
And Mr. Mayor, then I would also like to state to the other council members, I appreciate Mr. Marshall suggesting $200, which is kind of a base infraction assessment. And when I used to be able to practice before him, I looked forward to my clients only having to pay that. But I would really encourage, if we move this forward, that amount be raised to the maximum amount allowed under our municipal ordinances, that the court be given the discretion, especially because if somebody is texting, flagrantly texting, it leads to the death of someone. I would hate to have to look at somebody's family and go, well, sorry, you're limited to 40% of what we could allow. And in this particular instance, I think this is egregious enough. I'd like to see it to the maximum amount.
Councilmember Kellogg, and then Wesco.
I guess I'm going to dovetail on that. That's kind of the point where I was going, but a different facet. State law, if you are to speed in a work zone, fines double. You know, I'd kind of like to look at the possibility, if a accident or an incident happens while it's proven that somebody was texting, if we could have double fines there too. You know, I mean, this is something that's very serious. You know, I mean, in the blink of an eye, you can kill somebody, and that's not dramatizing anything at all. So it's serious. As long as I'm completely in support of giving our police everything they can to ensure or to help ensure the safety of everybody else out there that's not doing this. So, it's just a matter of time before it comes to Raymore, because it's happening all around us. So, but, is there something that we don't have any legal tonight? Would we be able to, have increased fines for an incident or an accident if it was proved to be a contributing factor was texting or using a device that distracted them from the road?
Mr. Verboen?
Thank you, sir. What we will do before we bring this to the council, if it is the consensus of the council to do that, is we will check to see if the fine portion of the state statute restricts us in the amount. But of course, the $200 is less than state statute has in it. If it does not, we would bring it to the council with that information, but plug in the state statute amounts, which are higher. And if it was the council's decision during your discussion on it to raise those, would that be amenable?
Sounds like a good way to go.
Very good.
Councilmember Westcott?
If somebody's distracted while driving and it ends up in a death, doesn't that end up, because there are going to be different charges filed, it's going to move it away from municipal court and into a jurisdiction that is more apt to handle that, like our state court. And so at that point, whatever we would find is kind of irrelevant, because it moves out of our jurisdiction into somebody who is more adequately equipped to handle it. Isn't that correct?
That's absolutely correct, that if death, serious injury, any very serious incident that this would arise from would be in state court anyway.
So to me, I don't mind, increasing fines and things of that nature, which, it's fine, because especially if it's a serious, situation. But again, I don't want to go into, whether or not we're going to deem something as a felony or anything else, because that, again, moves away from us into, a different jurisdiction.
Well, and Councilmember Westcott, the correlation I'm going at is, right now in Raymore, you can have a ticket for defective equipment and you pay the same amount as what the recommendation is. And so to me, I just see there's a difference in severity there, and that's what I wanted to stress, that it would be more, again, if it's 300, 500, whatever would be allowable. But for me, the idea, again, to be able to look at somebody's family and go, their light bulb was out and they pay the same amount as this person who committed a greater offense. And this is for the stuff that stays here within the city. Because again, anything the driver does, okay, they don't kill anybody and it moves up to the state level, but what about the close calls that our law enforcement could have an opportunity to stop and address? So,
Councilmember Holman?
I would agree with Councilmember Moorhead's position and Councilmember Kellogg as well. I think the opportunity to at least consider raising the fines is going to get people's attention. I think the general street emphasis or talk, if you will, becomes after a few of those get issued, and if you lay the money down, it gets people's attention, and basically the message becomes, yes, they're serious about this, as opposed to our seatbelt tickets. When they first introduced that in the state of Missouri, it was $10, and there were literally people going, fine, give me my $10 ticket. I'd rather not wear it. So it really wasn't the deterrent that we thought it was going to be at $10. There's been some attempts to address that as well. But I agree. I think at least it ought to have the option to have a little bit larger fine to show our citizenry that we care about their safety. I have to admit my bias as a longtime traffic safety advocate, and again, I share the chief's position. I think Councilman Kellogg's that it shouldn't be just related or relegated to 21 and under. I think it should be for everybody, but until the state makes their move, then we'll have to do the best we can.
All righty. I do have a question, but let's go ahead and move forward with this one, and with the fine structure redefined.
Very good, sir.
I did have a question, though, and I'm going to have to put you on the spot, Chief. Oh. No, it's not a question about feral cats, so we're okay. And in reference to the recent Supreme Court case that basically said that you need a search warrant to look at a device, what, do we expect that we'll be writing a lot of citations on texting? Or is this more of a tool that we can use to educate the public that you were weaving, you said you weren't texting, I saw you doing something with your right hand, that I, you know, how is this going to play out?
Well, we certainly, I mean, in all areas, whether it's traffic violations or noise complaints, I mean, we certainly are always aiming for voluntary compliance. And so we'd like to think that a public education campaign, whether it's in the schools or whether it's on our Facebook page or, you know, we put information out, that people will voluntarily comply. We know that that's not the case. People don't always voluntarily comply, but, you know, if you save a life or you prevent an accident, because they're not always the fatality accidents, they are the close calls, they are the accidents where maybe nobody's hurt, but there's serious property damage, which raises insurance rates and all of those things, that if we could keep that from happening because a parent out there decides that they're not going to let their 16-year-old have that electronic device in the car, you know, based on the ordinance or based on the law, then we've scored a victory, I think.
Thank you.
Sure.
And how is that cat doing?
The cats are great. The feral cats.
Gutsy move, huh? 2 feral cats. All righty. And the next item, road striping review. And yes, this is the one that I've been waiting for. Actually, it is. What was it, a year ago or so that I asked if we could paint different colors on the roads?
Well, over time, several of our council members have approached us, up to and including just a few council meetings ago, asking about road striping and getting an overview and kind of where staff is at on it. So without further ado, I will call on Mr. Krass.
Well, from time to time, we do get complaints or concerns about the road striping, and in particular on 58 Highway. We get a lot in the spring, and we get a lot in the fall during the day when the sun is at that really low angle where you can't you can't really see, and the sun's kind of reflecting off the pavement and the striping both. And what that really is related to is as the pavement ages, if you go out there today and look in front of Foxwood Springs, the color of the pavement, the color of the sidewalk, color of the curb, it's all pretty close. And so one of the ways you can address this is with contrast striping. And I've shown in my memo the examples of a couple of different ways to do it. And if any of you travel regularly on 435, there's actually, as you go westbound into Kansas, on the flyover, it's striped with as what's shown on the upper picture on page 2 of my memo. And then as you get further west, they do break into a more just the skip, a black and white skip. It's shown on the second photo. So we're proposing that we may want to adopt this as a striping method on some of our older, or some of our multi-lane roads as the pavement ages, like Dean Avenue and in particular 58 Highway, where we have the designated lane striping. We're still looking and evaluating whether or not we to do it in-house or by contract, and we'll be making a recommendation as we move forward with the budget. One of the things we will be doing, subject to council wanting us to proceed, is we'll do a couple of test strips on 58 Highway. With either one of these methods, we can get, with a 5-gallon bucket, we can get about 400 feet of striping. So we'll take a look and maybe just do a couple of test cases, one at westbound, one eastbound, and see which works best as we get further into fall here. We start striping again late in July in anticipation of school, so July, August, we'll look at doing the test strip on 58 Highway.
It would also be our intent when we do that test striping to let the council know ahead of time where it's going to be, and then we would put that up on the city's website, invite public feedback on what they like. As far as the budget impact is concerned, Mike has given me pricing already for a paint striper that would allow us not only to do this, but also hit the rest of the roads multiple times each year where we weren't actually doing contrast striping. It's expensive, but I think more than $10 is expensive on anything, so that's not saying anything. It's a low bar. We're putting that up against what a contractor would charge us to do select multi-lane roads within the contract. And while I'd like to be able to bring to the council a proposal for a paint striper so we could do all of those roads multiple times every single year, we may be limited to continuing to contract out, but with a preferred method, just to keep you updated.
Questions of staff? Councilmember Kellogg, then Moorhead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I've driven west on 58, it's mostly when I've witnessed the reflection and the blending and all that. I'm kind of curious. 58 kind of undulates a little bit. I'm wondering if the difficulty to see is more pronounced as you're going up towards the sunset or going down those small hills. Do we have any idea where those are? The only thing I know is that when I'm going west and I'm looking at that sun, it is very difficult, and especially if there's rain, if the pavement's wet.
No, we really haven't looked at that. We could take a look at that before we do a test stripe if you wanted to hold off and we can get kind of the worst area. I just see it when I drive. I see it equally bad. I mean, in the morning when I turn onto Johnson to come here. I mean, it's you get the fall when that sun's coming up, and then as you said, when it rains, I think it's equally bad. And if we could stripe the whole. We really don't have the capability to stripe the whole road with the equipment we have, but I think at least a test strip, and then after winter, when the stripes need to be touched up anyway, we can look at what we need to do in the spring and how we best accomplish that.
Councilmember Moorhead, and then Wesco.
Well, I'm very supportive of the staff recommendation on this. I'm excited about this. On a slightly different striping issue is right out here in front of Johnston Parkway in the turn lanes. I was one that brought this up last year, and unfortunately we've got traffic crossing it so many different ways that if you're turning left on the northbound Johnston Parkway and somebody's turning left from the southbound, it's scary because the people coming southbound sometimes don't realize that they have to stay tighter in their lane, and unfortunately it's to be expected with all the traffic across there. That solid line gets worn down to the point to where, especially if there's a truck with a trailer, I just stop. I can't even go because people are constantly coming into my lane, and I didn't know if what thoughts could help solve that. And
Well, we could certainly freshen that. It's on our list to do when we do the intersection. We're going to be, as school gets closer, we start doing intersections and stop bars, and that's definitely one of our target areas. I think the best answer is we'll just keep an eye on it, and as it starts wearing, as you said, under traffic, we'll just touch it up more frequently.
Councilmember Wesco.
With the cost of the equipment priced at what it is, would it be prudent to have a conversation with another municipality about maybe a joint purchase, going together on a piece of equipment? Because even Belton, has the same issues going over. I mean, does that make sense to go together and to purchase the equipment for the betterment of both communities?
We can certainly talk to them. a lot of the roads that Belton would be striping are state highways. You know, 58, Y Highway, I think they have very few multi-lane roads that are under their jurisdiction, but we could explore that with them.
Well, go ahead. I think they're all good.
Oh, no, it's back.
That's on. I got it. Your first sentence talks about following MoDOT specifications. Does that mean that we have to stay with the white? Can you use yellow? Is it an option, or do you?
White is,
Yeah.
white is lane striping, yellow is center line striping. So
I
yes, that's not MoDOT, that's manual uniform traffic control devices.
Oh, okay, yeah, it varies from location to location. And I would echo most of what I've heard, and I like the recommendation. I think that's great, and we're starting to look at it and do the test striping. It's a good idea, and getting the dollar side of things. We talked a little bit about basically normal driving conditions, you know, where the sun is an issue and wear and things like that. I'll tell you when it hits me most from a personal standpoint is we get a gully washer coming out of here and it's dark and it's raining. The first thing I look is like, okay, they're all over the road. I don't know which lane or where the lanes are at. I look when I can't see them. That's when I get concerned because I know everybody else has experienced the same thing. Same thing with snow. And I just show me one once in a while so I can kind of keep it between the lines. That was one of the issues that I personally experienced. And of course, I think everybody thinks it's a good idea to have robust and bright striping so you can see where you should be and where you're supposed to be. And I like the fact that obviously 58 probably needs to be our main concern, our heavy hitter, but other multi-lane roadways, another example, Mr. Moore had brought up a good one at Johnston. Another one is Kentucky there where it widens out to the 3 lanes right coming up to 58, because actually one is people mistake for another through lane going north, and it's actually a turn lane to turn left. And so some of those smaller spots would be, I think, invaluable. You have, I think, a pretty good plan in place. You talked about hitting them before school starts, but just wanted to bring those points up. Thank you.
Other comments? Well, I think we'll move forward with it, and I look forward to the test striping. Excuse me. And there was one item that you wanted to discuss with the council. Is that on this agenda, or?
If you don't mind, sir.
Okay.
Just for discussion points, some calendar items to bring up with the council, and then something that developed this afternoon. All the council did receive the email from Ms. Doak relative to fireworks. The police did two requests came through. Just want to let you all know the police did respond as she had indicated. We do have a notice of the incident, but no report was actually taken because there was no violation, because obviously fireworks are legal to shoot in the city. The second request that came in was, what are other cities in the area doing? And this afternoon, just before that request came in, I did go into the city clerk's office and ask them to call our 13 survey cities that we always use just to find out, do you have a ban and what are you banning? Because they're kind of all over the board on that. Some of them only ban certain types. Some of them, like us, ban luminaires. So we'll get all that information. Once we have all that information accumulated, we'll send all that out to the council, sir, just for your information. Some timing issues, the survey status, we were getting a lot of calls on that. The citizen survey portion for the Civic Center is completed. They closed it 2 Fridays ago to further input, got a lot of responses. They are working on the cross-tabbing now, as well as amassing the comments that were associated with it. They always regret putting in that open comment section because it takes the largest amount of time. They have completed the market analysis, and they are trimming that up to match it to the census numbers that they had. They wanted to give you the most updated numbers on that. My hope is going to be to get all of the drafts together, get a presentation prepared, and have that ready for public presentation sometime the first 2 weeks of August, may have to push to that fourth week if there's anything in the numbers that needs to be regurgitated out. Just thought we'd update you on that. Reminder that the budget meeting, you'll hear this from me now every council meeting. The budget meeting is, because I love it so much,
At the beginning and the end of each council meeting.
is Saturday, August 16th at 8 o'clock. Just one last item that I wanted to ask for council input on. I would like to offer up, especially during the interim acting city manager period, to be available to the council members by ward one night a week. So we would cycle through the entire council in a month just for informal discussion. Obviously, I would not want it to preclude any sort of, if you felt like you needed to pick up the phone right away and give a call, but a lot of times we get, I think that the council might be hesitant to ask a question because they think it's going to take too long. You know, how does this fund work? What happens with these revenues? What's the restricted fund all about? The mayor and I meet once a week. I've kind of asked, just for my own help, that meeting be renewed. I think it went on for some time with Mr. Berlin, but then kind of faded
Yeah,
down.
Mr. Berlin and I met for a number of months every week. And then as we learned how we each did things, the number of meetings dropped off, only to be then recalled whenever one of us had, you know, a topic that needed to be discussed. But we always had it established that every week at this time, we're going to make ourselves available to each other, and it worked out real well. It's working out well. Again, we're meeting regularly.
And I wouldn't propose it as, let me just throw this out, and I recognize the council is busy, and you got to be, you're already called upon for several meetings. It would be more of a, I'm in my office from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock every Tuesday night, first week of the month for the Ward 1 members, second week of the month, Ward 2, so that we didn't get into any ethics issues there with too many people meeting. If you didn't feel like you had anything, you wouldn't have to be there, but you'd know my door was open and then the front door was open and I was in my office. If you had anything you wanted to bring up, you know, future work session topics, whatever. Obviously nothing that would be, I think we all kind of know the rules. And so I just wanted to offer that to council, get your feedback on it.
Comments from the council? Councilmember Holman, then Kellogg.
Back to the survey, did they indicate how many surveys they ended up receiving yet?
They haven't given me the final exact number. I know it is significantly more than they contracted for. Early on, they were already up to 450.
Outstanding. Thank you, sir.
Kellogg and then Moorhead.
Thank you. I'd be supportive of what Jim just talked about as far as the weekly meetings amongst the members, and he addressed exactly what I was going to say. I was going to suggest Ward 1 be the first week, Ward 2 second, such and so forth, you know. And, I mean, it's not like trying to herd cats at this point. It's just two of us, you know, trying to come up with a, yeah, just two cats.
Feral.
Two feral calico cats.
I'll have the chief at every meeting.
Yeah, and it also doesn't preclude, you know, sending an email or something like that. If something comes up, you just shoot it on in. Councilmember Moore?
Or a text message.
I only wanted to say, I also think it's a great idea.
All right, in that case, I would suggest that each of the members of the council, we don't have our representatives from Ward 4 today, but we can certainly let them know about it.
Thank you, sir.
What's that? Well, but I did get an email, and they did ask to be updated of what we did this evening. Of course, they can also watch on Channel 7 and streaming from the internet. So, with no more business coming before us this evening, we'll adjourn the work session. Thank you, everybody.